Hey guys, Sam Miller from Panhandle Precision. Welcome back to Straight Talk. Alright, in this episode of Straight Talk, we're going to talk about bullet ballistic coefficient and drag models and which numbers do I use in my ballistic calculators. Now, right now, I think there are 4 different drag models you can use that I know of. One is G1, one is G7, one is the custom drag model in applied ballistics, and now Hornady has their 4 degrees of freedom. Of those, I've used 3 of those. I haven't used the Hornady one. I put it on my phone and played with it, and I decided that I didn't need that kind of complication. Anyway, the one that I use in every platform that I can use it in is G7. The only platform I've used over the last couple of years that I couldn't use a G7 BC in was the Leica HDB Edition 2200 binocular. Now, when you build that custom curve for that binocular and you go to Leica's website, the number you input for a BC is a G1 number. So be sure you're inputting a G1 number. Otherwise, your trajectory is going to be way off. G7, if you put a G7 number in there, it's going to think it's G1, and it's going to call for a whole lot more trajectory to get to the target. So that's the only exception. That one was G1. Now, my 2 primary ballistic calculators are Bullet Flight M on an iPhone and a Kestrel Elite or Sportsman. The biggest thing with this, I think, the reason that this question comes up a lot are guys are trying to figure out should they get the Kestrel Elite or the Kestrel Sportsman, and they want to know how much value are they going to get using custom drag models, because they saw on a forum somewhere how a guy broke out all these different drag models and ballistic coefficients, and one's more accurate than the other. Well, I'm going to pull up a chart here in a couple of minutes and show you what I came up with several times over the years up in the woods while I was waiting for an animal to come out, and I was punching buttons into my ballistic calculators to see what all the differences make in conditions and ballistic coefficient and muzzle velocity. Okay, the ballistic coefficient of a bullet is just a value that's assigned to it to describe how well it flies through the air. So the higher the number within any given drag model, the better that bullet's going to be at resisting drag. So when we shoot the gun, the ballistic calculator takes a look at that ballistic coefficient and uses that as well as the muzzle velocity and all the conditions that you enter into it to figure out how long it's going to take the bullet to get from our gun to our target. So that time of flight is what affects how much time gravity has to work on the bullet. So as long-range shooters, we're always looking for more muzzle velocity and higher ballistic coefficients. Now, to come up with your BC number, you can take it right off the box. Over the last several years, I've been using BC numbers right off these boxes, and they've been pretty accurate. So Berger puts them right on, G1 and G7. Hornady in their ELDs, they put them right on there. Nosler RDFs, they all have them on there. If you get a box of bullets that doesn't have a BC assigned to it, I'd recommend going to the website maybe and taking a peek there. There are also in your loading manuals and your reloading manuals, there are BC numbers listed. Now, I don't have any of the newer reloading manuals, but all of my older ones that are at least 10 or 12 years old, all they list in there are G1 BCs. The one exception is the Berger reloading manual I have lists both of them. So just be sure to pay attention to which drag model ballistic coefficient you're using. In lieu of all that, another good option is this book by Brian Litz, Ballistic Performance of Rifle Bullets. I think there's a newer version of this one out, but anyway, in the book he has drawings of a lot of different bullets that he's looked at, so you have the dimensions of the bullets, and then he also does a ballistic coefficient breakdown right here. And what he does is he averages it by velocity, which is kind of cool. But in the end, these G7 BC averages that he puts in, at least on the Berger bullets that I've been using and on the Hornady bullets I've been using, are almost exactly what are right on the box. So certainly close enough that it doesn't matter. Okay, here's a chart I put together using a Kestrel Elite and Kestrel Link. It's an applied ballistics ballistic program. All I did was I took my 300 Win Mag that I have a lot of experience with, shooting a 210 grain Berger hunting VLD at 2,950 feet a second, and I built 3 different profiles. One using a G1, that's the one in blue, with a G1 BC of 625. One using a G7, which is the one I've been using in it, 0.321 for that BC. And then I built another one using the custom drag model that's available through the Elite platform on the Kestrel. And they just come up at 1.00 for whatever bullet you're using. So you don't really get to see what's going on there. Over in the left column we've got yards, and I just broke it down in 200-yard increments out to a mile, and then I added in a 2-mile shot just for shits and giggles basically. But if you take a look at this, you would be hard pressed to say that you missed a target because of whatever drag model you're using, whether it's a G1, G7, or custom drag model. I don't think it makes that big of a difference. I use G7 because it's available on just about every platform I use. There's good information for it on different bullets, and I just trust it. I've been using it the longest now. But if you look over here at G1, if you're using a 210 grain Berger HVLD and you go off a G1 profile, it'd be hard to say you missed the target because you were using G1. It's not that far off from G7. If you come down to a mile, 65.5 minutes, these are minute of angle corrections, 65.5 minutes of angle to hit that target. G7 says 65. You're only going to be a half minute off. You're going to shoot a half minute over the target. And most of us are going to go, oh, my muzzle velocity was a little high on that shot. But anyway, the two that are in most contention, I think, because of the different platforms available, are G7 and custom drag model. And if you look at this, I think for most of us, it just won't make any difference whatsoever whether you use one or the other. This load is subsonic at 1,670 yards. I have validated that load to 1,682 on a couple of occasions, and all I did, the actual muzzle velocity off my magneto speed is 2,970 feet a second. I took 20 feet a second off of my velocity to make that hit at 1,682. So that's using a G7 profile. But anyway, take a peek at that. I encourage you to pick up your ballistic solver and just push buttons on it. Do different models. Look at your conditions. Look at your scope height. Look at your BC. It'll give you a better understanding of how all this stuff works and what matters and what really doesn't matter. Alright guys, that does it. G7 is the ballistic coefficient that I recommend across all the platforms that I use it in. I think it's more important to learn how to read conditions and do a careful trajectory validation than it is to worry about whatever drag model you're using. Anyway, we'll see you on the next Straight Talk. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.